Wi-Fi is a bit dodgy. So hello everyone. In this workshop, we will be talking about our team, the SDGs and the books, read responsibly, the SDGs and books, tropes and stories, and finally our team books recommendations.
So here on this slide, we have a quote by Stephen King, which states, "Books are uniquely portable magic." This is like the core of this presentation. Books are one of the oldest forms of media, like existing, like books and stories. We started with stories which were told orally and transmitted orally from generation to generation. We then started figuring out how to, draw and how to create our own, our own alphabet and our writing systems. And we started writing them and putting them in scrolls and then in books. And books are one of the oldest forms of media, and stories are as well. And media is a mirror of our society, and society is a mirror of our media and culture. So books are a uniquely portable magic. Not only do they transport us to, other places and get us to, experience fantasy stories and experience, wonderful scenarios and like the magic of stories and like the entertainment factor. They also help us shape our value systems and our vision and help us get a new perspective. And so books are hugely influential in our society, and the media in general is extremely influential in our society. So books are uniquely portable magic, so you can take them everywhere and they will influence the world we live in. We can go on to the next slide.
So we will now quickly introduce ourselves, and you can come and meet some of our team who are presenting today. So hi everyone, I'm Lois. I'm a 15-year-old sophomore currently residing in Gibraltar, which is a small territory next to Spain. Though I'm originally from Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK. I've been in MUN Impact, otherwise known as MUNI, for roughly 14 to 15 months, or a year and 2 months. And I've been doing MUN for 3 years. In MUNI Global, I'm the Co-DSG of the Europe team. However, my other jobs in MUNI are the Co-DSG of community building within the E3 summits. I am also the DSG of middle school cohorts in MUN at Home, the DSG of internal operations for the SDG hubs, and the Co-DSG of Europe and DSG of the creative department within the 100K Deeds team. And it's very nice to meet you all.
Hey everyone, my name is Rita. I am 17 years old and I'm a high school senior. I am the assistant DSG for MUNI Global Europe as my main position within MUN Impact. I've been here for the past 5 months since May. And I was born and raised in a not so small territory next to Spain called Portugal, in Porto. I've been doing Model Parliament for the last 4 years, and I've been doing MUN for like on and off for about 6 months, and then I had done it before, but okay, I've been doing these kind of simulations for 4 years. Other jobs that I hold within MUNI is I helped organize the summit. I'm part of the secretariat. I am a MUN home mentor often. I'm a part of the WashPath vetting team. I'm presenting about that later today. If you guys want to sign up. And I'm a part of the Education for Justice team within MUNI. So nice to meet you all.
Hi all, I'm Alice and I'm a 17 years old senior. I was born in London and I reside in Surrey, England. I've been doing MUN at MUNI for 4 months and I've started doing MUN 5 months ago. In MUNI Global, I'm a diplomat for Europe and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to work with this amazing team. And I'm also part of the WashPath vetting team.
So what exactly does the team of diplomats, assistant DSGs and DSGs do within our team, otherwise known as MUNI Global? So firstly, we conduct outreach to new schools, conferences and organizations to achieve getting more partners throughout the year. We then also have a defined leadership structure with the possibility of promotion. For example, I was a diplomat in the 2020 to 2021 team, and I then got promoted to a DSG for the 2021 to 2022 team. Thirdly, we, the students within our team, lead our own partnerships, initiatives, and outreach events. An example of this within the Europe team is European, which happened back in May 2021. Finally, we're able to gain valuable experience within communication and leadership, which is good for college and jobs within the future. So this is our team from all 7 regions with a diversity of students in positions and regions. You can see our SGs, Matt O and Zain Muzelli, and diplomats from all of our regions and our diplomats that we have.
So what do we do as a team of diplomats, assistant TSGs, and DSGs? Well, for starters, we conduct outreach to schools, conferences, and NGOs to help spread awareness and of the SDGs through MUN, and also through other projects that we often organize through direct action. And next up, our teams do different projects such as summits, global weeks of action, stay tuned for that, workshops and conferences. An example of a project that the Europe team did last year was Moon, which was in May this year, actually, but like last year it was organized, which was a 3-day conference with over 150 participants. And finally, we have leadership positions that unite youth leaders under the common flag of the SDGs. You get to meet an amazing community if you join MUNI. In fact, just saying, like not trying to convince anyone to join, but it's true. Every program within MUNI has leadership positions, and we are always looking for new members. And I'll post the links for some available some forms, including our diplomat application form later. And for example, MUNI Global is always accepting new diplomats. MUN at Home is looking for new mentors every month, and 100 KDs have under Secretary General and head positions open at the moment. So I'll post some of these links in the chat right now. So if you want to join MUN Impact, you have the chance to.
So SDGs and books, how can you relate SDGs and books? So reading is an engaging way and a profound way to explore wider concepts. Books aren't just characters, plots, but what themes and ideas they represent. We can certainly link this to SDGs and help spread their importance through the love of books. So now I'm going to talk about the SDGs. The 2030 agenda is about implementing 17 goals to every country's agenda to ultimately help improve equality and quality of life in our rapidly developing world. This then leads to sustainability, which is like the core of our solutions to achieve this goal successfully without conflicting with the natural environment and resources. And then we finally unite this under the United Nations. We unite under the same goal by working together to find the best solutions for all. All of this would then be interlinked with making our goal a reality, as every nation's cooperation would create a stronger impact for the betterment of our planet.
Here is the smallest recap of like context for this presentation. So we'll talk about a little bit about the SDGs as a whole and like MUN Impact's main SDG, like the SDGs we identify with the most as organization, our work, and books and the SDGs. So what are the SDGs? The Agenda 2030 is composed of 17 goals for sustainable development that the world needs to come together to achieve by the year 2030 in order to ensure a sustainable future for all. So each goal has a number of targets, which are like specific little goals that we need to achieve in order to achieve that goal, just little indicators. The SDGs MUN Impact works with the most, and our work we identify with the most are SDG 4, quality education, because as you can see, we're all students. Our programs focus on SDG education and MUN education. In a way, we partner with schools. MUN at Home is like MUN and SDG education, and like all our programs like focus on education. We all learn a lot while we're here. And then SDG 17, because we also make a lot of partnerships in order to assure that the sustainable development goals are achieved. We partner with clubs, we partner with conferences, we partner with NGOs. Our university team partners with corporations even, I think. So as you can see, partnership for the goals. We're here to ensure that partnerships are made for the goals. And we also unite a lot of youth leaders under the common flag of the SDGs. So that's also a partnership for the goals. So books and the SDGs. Books can help us achieve the sustainable development goals because how I said before, media, books included, mirror society, and society kind of learn value systems from books, especially young people when you're like in your developmental years and like in your formative years. Books shaped a lot of who I am. Like the books I read in my childhood when I was 8, 9, I think they made me the person I am today. And like the more books we read and like the more perspectives we learn about, the better I think equipped we are to fight for activism causes and for the SDGs, especially if we are choosing our books right, which we'll talk about in a minute. So yeah, books mirror society in a way, and society kind of mirrors the books back. So books can help us achieve the SDGs, definitely. So before we kind of start this presentation, we would just like to give you a little disclaimer that these kind of exists, book club for the SDGs by the UN, but it is targeted from children to 6 to 12. I know we have some younger people in the summit. Not a lot of them are under the age of 12 or 12, but like, yeah, if you have a child 6 to 12 years old in your life, the UN has a book club for the SDGs, which is still ongoing, where people read books, kids read books, and for the SDGs, and it encourages reading, it encourages education, it encourages SDG education, and it encourages, you know, just learning more about specific SDGs. I think they're doing SDG 13 now, so SDG 14 should be next. And yeah, I think we can change the slide.
So according to UNESCO's website about literacy, 773 million people are illiterate worldwide. That's around 9.91% of the world, which is too high in my opinion. So I have a question for you all. Do you think this is too many people? And how do you believe we can drop this to try and decrease the people who are illiterate worldwide? Please do write in the chat what your opinions about this are, as we'd love to see what you guys think about this. But moving on, we'll now be talking about the ways you can read responsibly so you can stay sustainable while reading your books.
So you can support your local libraries when available. It's often cheaper and it shows your local authorities that investing in books and libraries is important. And it helps you declutter and gives your books a second life. Not only is it fun, but it's free and sustainable. That way you can have the whole library at the palm of your hand, be the friend of the environment and our earth. You could also thrift books or buy secondhand if possible, donate books to school libraries or secondhand shops, and so that way you facilitate that accessibility to books and reading. You could borrow and trade books with your friends and family, and while you're at it, you could discuss about the books to them and like make that connection and tell them what you've learned about it, you know. And then you could also buy ebooks instead of physical books if you can. Support small bookshops and independent businesses, helping SDG 8. And make sure you dispose of unusable and non-donatable items through recycling.
So we'll now be moving on to the SDGs and book characters, tropes, and stories. So an example is SDG 4, quality education. And for SDG 4, a few examples of characters and authors that tie with the topic of education within fiction and non-fiction books are people like Lala Yusuf, yes, Jomar, yes, and Anshali. And a quote from Malala, which talks about education, is when someone takes away your pens, you realize quite how important education is. For those who don't know who she is, she's an activist from Pakistan who publicly speaks about the education of girls that was imposed by the Taliban. This quote shows that without schooling, there would be no education. Education is the backbone of life, and we then limit ourselves with no education. For example, you limit yourself with getting things like jobs and higher education. So when your pens are taken away from you, you realize how important education is. Older books are often featured with the trope of women in education, especially if they're written by female authors. So this sort of shows the fight for education with more of women authors rather than male, as this can kind of tie into sort of the inequality side of it as well.
And if I can add something, can you please go ahead? Yeah, so the trope of, as Lois was saying, the trope of women in education is like a big trope in like 19th, 18th century, no, more 19th century books, especially if written by like women authors who were like more progressive and that were themselves struggling to fight for access to education. And so we see that reflected a lot in some older books that have stayed classics till this day because, you know, they're a mark of history and they're very good books. We have Jo March from Little Women, for instance, who was a big fan of books. She loved reading. She was like kind of a tomboy in the book, and she like for the time, of course, and she would like really wanted to get an education, and she was really for women's empowerment. However, she had to fight for it. And then we have Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables. I don't know if you guys have found the show Anne with an E. I have not, but I've just finished the book Anne of Green Gables. And Anne is like showcases really well how we can, like, education can change someone's life. She really valued her education, went from being an orphanage girl who was adopted by chance by a couple of siblings from Green Gables in, I don't know the name of the town, I'm sorry, but in Canada, to like someone who went to study and like become a teacher. Spoiler alert, this is a very old book, so this is not a spoiler, by the way. But yeah, this showcases how education was valued, especially by women during, you know, this period. And like, there's even a quote on Anne of Green Gables that goes something like, oh, it's not good for women to learn more than you have already learned as much as a woman can know without it being like sinful or without it being wrong, which kind of shows, you know, the shift of opinions that we had until today. And this also kind of ties in with SDG 5, doesn't it? Okay, we can move on. I'm sorry if I kind of rambled about this a little bit. Okay, so we have SDG 16 now. SDG 16 is also a very common trope in books and media in general. So let's do this a little bit interactive. I want to see a quick show of hands, use your Zoom hands for this. How many of you have read a book or watched a movie or TV series? Because I know some of you all probably don't read books on the regular. We know no one has time, but we try to make it work. About some sort of war or fight for peace in the last, let's say, 2 weeks. Show of hands. I don't think I can raise mine, but I would if I could. Okay, I can. I'm going to give you guys a minute so you can reach your hand. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, a lot of us have, because, you know, this is such a common trope in you know, in media in general. If you've read Harry Potter, it's a trope there. If you've read Percy Jackson, it's also a fight for peace book. But today we're going to talk about some specific characters, and we're going to talk about some unknown voices novel, a fiction, and 2 other novels that are, they're all fiction, but 2 other novels that are not on voices. But yeah, so we'll start by saying today we are highlighting some characters that are really connected to the topic of peace, justice, and strong institutions. And for starters, we have Star Carter from The Hate U Give. And what a fabulous book The Hate U Give is. I think the best part about Star's journey is that this book in general is that it centers Star and her problems as a member of a marginalized community, as a Black girl, and does not fall into a saviorism trope, which is often a problem with books depicting the stories about, you know, racism, homophobia, and other types of hate suffered by marginalized communities. But here we have a quote from the book. What's the point of having a voice if you're going to be silent in those moments you shouldn't be? So this is exactly what the book is about. It's about start using her voice to fight for justice. So if you have never read The Hate You Gave, this might be like, this isn't, I swear it's not spoilers. It tells the story of Star Carter, who is a Black girl whose friend gets killed right next to her when they're driving home from a party as a result of police brutality. He was like reaching for his wallet and he got shot to get, his driver's license. It follows her journey seeking justice and systemic change for him. This is a very specific display of the topic of peace and strong institutions in the context of discrimination and systemic issues. And this story also puts youth in the spotlight and shows a teenager's fight for justice, because she's very young. So I think she's 16 or around 17. I'm not sure. I've read this book a while ago. I definitely recommend reading this. It is a known voices novel. It is, it really depicts well our current, the current issues of police brutality and systemic racism and other stuff. So I completely recommend you read this. And then I'm going to jump a little bit and I'm going to go back to Katniss in a bit. But we have Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. The classic book also talks about racism and the fight for racial justice, showcasing Atticus Finch. Atticus Finch is a lawyer and his journey getting justice for Black men who wrongly got accused of a crime. And the main difference between this book and The Hate You Give is that this book was written in the 60s. Sorry, I left something fell off my desk. But yeah, it was written in the 60s. It kind of has marks of the time. It is a story that does center like a savior, a white person solving the issues of marginalized community, a guy who's very privileged, is seen as the hero instead, of the person who actually suffers. But yeah, the classic book also talks about racism and the fight for racial justice. And basically, in this book, a Black man gets wrongfully convicted of a crime in a very racist town, and Atticus has to kind of defend him in court. He's on his side, and basically it just shows the journey of Atticus trying to defend him, and like along the way teaching his children about this problem and about justice. And so I think it is a good book, although we need to recognize it has marks of the time. And a lot of you probably have read this book for school. I haven't, because where I live, we don't read this book. But if you're in the United States, you've probably already read this book, and like in a certain grade. Finally, in a more fictional world, like less impacted by this kind of stuff, we have the Hunger Games and Katniss Everdeen. Have you guys ever seen or watched or read the Hunger Games? Okay, so the Hunger Games cover a dystopian society where the capital won a war against 12 districts. And as a reminder, this capital makes these games every year where everyone fights until only one person is alive. All the tributes from each district, there's 2 people from each district, and like these 24 people fight until only one person is alive. Aside from that, the society where those games happen is obviously extremely unfair. Like, firstly, the games themselves are a problem, right? The games themselves are a problem because, it's not fair to have people fight to death, when they have basically no choice. And aside from that, the society is extremely unfair. The President Snow misuses his power, and Katniss just gets fed up with that because, she sees, when the capital people are living the life, like they have tons of good stuff, they have food, they have riches, and then in the districts we are just working so much and we're living in misery, and we have a president that misuses his power, and we have abuse, and we have a lot of stuff that, and it's not okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stage a revolution, and so she does. This book also talks about fight for justice against an unfair ruling system, and so I think it also connects to the topic of peace, justice, and strong institutions. We can move on.
So let's see what book recommendations we have for you all. So here are some of our book recommendations for SDG 4. I won't go through the whole thing because that would take all day, and Rita and Lloyd did a great job going in depth with the books for the SDG 4 and SDG 16, but I'll briefly go through some of them, some which you might have not heard of. So we've all heard of Matilda and Roald Dahl and how it shows the love and fun of learning and the power of that. And Jane Eyre is actually a Victorian coming of age book. And it's about a strong, independent protagonist who, although she was born in like poverty and like a very, and though she lived through a quite fractured childhood, it's through her love and, you know, hard work, yes, and hard work for education that she managed to somehow create a very stately appearance of herself and somehow escape from that poverty a bit. And then Wonder by R.G. Palacio, I think we've all heard of it. We all loved Wonder. Even though school can be a challenge, it creates opportunity for us to connect with other people and build relationships and discover ourselves almost. So even though August is quite socially like disadvantaged because of his looks, his passion for learning and connecting with others quite well shines through. And then Spectacles is a bit of an odd one. I wasn't sure if I should include this on a list, but I think it is a very important novel. Actually, no, it's a play, not a novel. But I think this is to do more with the education of morality. So the play takes place in like a family dinner room with all the upper class people and their money and how they just talk flippantly about marriage and life without a care in the world about, you know, all the people living in poverty. And then one day an inspector came along and just highlights all their flaws and their ignorance and just basically educate family on altruism and just community almost, not money and all that capitalism. And so yeah, it's a great book. And so we move on to nonfiction. You've all heard of Malala, Michelle Obama, great model for your First Lady. And Educated by Tara West is a very interesting one. I'll briefly go through it. So it's a memoir, and the author, she was raised up in a fundamentalist Mormon family. So it's like a really strict religious family where education is it's like frowned upon. Even though this is in the USA, it's frowned upon by families who follow this fundamentalist religion. But the author, she wants to pursue education, and so that kind of gave her the opportunity to break away from this fundamentalist religion and see the world in a more clearer light. You know, yeah. Moving on.
So now we have some of the book recommendations for SDG 16. So some of the fiction books that we have are The Bleak House by Charles Dickens, who I'm sure all of you guys have heard. He's a very famous author. And then we also have The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which was mentioned earlier, and The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. To Kill a Mockingbird is about the topic of racism in the 19th century, I believe, 18th century, I'm not 100% sure, but it was a while ago. And it just shows how, yes, the 19th century, thank you, Rita. It just shows how this Atticus, who was a lawyer, and he was helping a Black family with this case in court, and it just shows how the Black community were treated in the 19th century. And with the nonfiction, we have Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow, and Fake Law by The Secret Barrister. So I'll now be handing over to Rita, who will be talking about some tips.
Yeah, so how can you make the most of your reading? How can you read productively for the SDGs? Reading for fun is really fun, but we can make more of reading than just, you know, a pastime activity. So I recommend you all to, especially with nonfiction books, but with fiction books as well, read mindfully. Take notes. I use Post-its, write on the book directly, highlight them, like if you can, because if you're borrowing it from the library, please don't write in books you borrow from the library for someone else. Thank you. Yeah, so take notes, use a reading journal, use an app like Goodreads, or there are others like Goodreads, like review the books. That's even useful for other people who will read it in the future. Read mindfully, take notes, like think about what you're reading. I also recommend that, we also all recommend that you diversify your bookshelf and read own voices novels, like novels that talk about systemic issues and, active and, discrimination in general are good, and about one's life experiences, and like a character who has life experiences with like disability, a health condition, being a person of a certain race, being a person who identifies with a certain gender, whatever. While reading them in general is nice, no one is better at writing the books about like those kind of identities as people who actually identify as, having a disability, having a health condition, because those people actually experience living in a world where, the people where, they experience life as a person in that category, or a person who, fits that identity. So we recommend that you read own voices novels. There are plenty out there. If you Google on Goodreads, you'll find a lot of them. And also diversify your bookshelf. Like read books by authors of various backgrounds. I promise you won't regret it. If it may feel like, if it is a completely different, different style of writing, it might feel daunting at first. If you go to an author of like a country or a nationality or or like a ethnicity where like linear narratives are less popular and they use different types of storytelling, it might be difficult at first. It might be daunting, but there are plenty of creators online who have lists of books that you can start with, and honestly take advantage of the internet, because we have it, and it's at the palm of our hands, and it's very useful. Also, increase variety. Don't stick to a certain single genre, or a couple of them. Like, if you love romance novels, that's great, but you should also try to read fantasy. You should also try to read poetry, because that way, firstly, you avoid getting stuck in a reading slump. If you read like 5 romance novels in a row, you'll eventually get on a reading slump, because tropes repeat themselves and you start getting tired of that genre. You can, and you'll just get a wider variety of things you're reading, tropes you're learning about, characters with certain characteristics. Just don't stick to a single genre, and this applies with fiction and nonfiction. If you read a lot of fiction, that's great, but try to read a nonfiction book once in a while. I promise it will change your life. It will be great. And find someone to discuss your reads with. This can be someone in your life. This can be someone like, this can be an internet group. This can be your local book club in your library or something. This can be whoever. Once again, you can take advantage of the internet, because we have Goodreads, and we have Goodreads, we have online book clubs, we have everything nowadays. And if you join MUNI Europe, we always have time to discuss a book or two. So for sure, find someone to discuss your reads with, potentially MUNI Europe diplomats. I don't know. Moving on.
So this is now the end of our presentation. We hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys would like to sign up as a diplomat, here is the link to that. And if you ever have any, yes?
No, you can go. I'll go after.
Okay. If you ever have any questions about any of the programs after this, yes, thank you. If you also have any questions about any of the programs after this has finished, please do reach out to either myself or Rita. Those are our emails. And here is the MUN Impact link, website link, if you would like to go and check that out. But yes, does anyone have any questions?
We had one a bit ago. So we are going to take questions first, and I guess after that we can kind of do our interactive element. Yeah, the person just reposted the message. Keeping in mind SDG 13, which is climate change, climate crisis, climate action, for those who don't know, do you think there should be a complete shift to ebooks only? In my opinion, and I'm going to let Alice and Lois give their opinion after this. In my opinion, no, for a bunch of reasons. First of all, we need to keep in mind that ebooks are not accessible to everyone, everywhere. Internet access is a privilege, even in very developed countries like, you know, the United States. There are people who do not have access to the internet. Even in developed countries like Portugal, there are people who do not have access to the internet. So we need to keep that in mind. Second of all, we can read sustainably while still read physical books. By borrowing out of libraries, by buying secondhand, and by recycling. Books in general are not that big of a contributor to climate change and to you know, unsustainable consumption and etc. Unless you are like buying 55 books out of Amazon every week, in which case I'd like to know which career path you're following, because you have a lot of money. But yeah, in that case, you'd be like doing something bad for the environment. But there are plenty of ways to read physical books in a sustainable way. And like nowadays, electronics, you know, we use them a little bit too much, especially for someone who does work on the computer. And if you do volunteering at an organization online like MUNI Impact, or you work for remotely, we spend a lot of time on the computer, and that's bad for our eyes, that's bad for our sleep, that's bad for everything. And that applies as well to, you know, your Kindle, your Kobo, your whatever e-reading device you have, that applies to that as well. So it's maybe sometimes it's healthier to get books. And lastly, you know, the experience of reading a physical book is different from reading an ebook, and just being able to write in like the pages and put post-its and index markers and stuff, that's something you cannot experience with a Kindle or a Kobo or an e-reader. And I'm going to hand it over to, I think we can go with Alice first.
I completely agree with everything you said. You said all of it perfectly. I'm not sure if there's anything I could add, but I'd say, yeah, I think the experience for reading a physical book is a lot different from, I feel like as like a bookworm myself, I feel like you connect a bit more just having the physical book. I'm not completely against the ebook. I think it could be inconvenient. It could be quite convenient in some ways, and it could be a bit cheaper. But I think by buying a physical book, you kind of help the book industry a bit more, if you know what I mean. And yeah, I agree with everything you said. Handing over to Lois.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends on what way you look at it as well. I think in ways of climate action, the complete shift to ebooks is a good thing, because obviously we are going to be helping the SDGs for that. And, you know, things like deforestation and the atmospheric things. But I feel like in the aspect of like economical circumstances, financial circumstances of each country, I don't think that is the best thing to do, as ebooks, I would say, are a lot more expensive than paperback books. So I feel like that would be a lot more difficult in that. But yes, I think that some of the e-books would be good, but not fully shift. From Manav, a lot of books also include implicit bias, maybe because the author thinks in a certain manner. How do you think that plays out in the long run, and is there any way for it to be curved? Rita, Alice, do any of you guys want to take this first?
Sure. So yeah, a lot of books include implicit bias. We all have our own implicit biases. even if we're like the top activists in the world, we have implicit biases. They are a part of society. They're part of the way we live. And we can try to work on them as much as possible, but they exist. They always exist in a certain way. Maybe because they are shaped in a certain manner. Or because of the way, like the place that they live, the perspective they have. How do I think that plays out in the world long run? Anyway, that could be curved. Okay, so in the long run, that affects our books, affects our, affects their books in a way, and that like they can start, even authors who are known for having good representation often have some problems in their books. I don't think there's any perfect book in terms of representation. There's always some issue. There's always like something that is misrepresenting a community in a way. And it's normal because we all have, our own implicit biases, even if you're working on them, as I said. And in the long run, we just have to be aware of that, and we just need to, read critically and think critically. Ways that can be curbed are when you're writing the book. After that, there are tons of editors. You can hire proofreaders who can give you an opinion about if the book is biased in a way. You can, or I think there are also sensitivity readers if your book really touches a subject that needs sensitivity. I think we can also, if we all read Own Voices novels, and a variety of them from, different people from different races, from different ethnicities, from different gender identities, for different sexual orientations, for different, like if for people who are able and disabled, for people who are facing health conditions or not, for people who just experience things in life that we haven't. I think we gain a better perspective of, how that community represents themselves and wants to see themselves represented. But in the long run, we cannot curb completely our own personal biases, implicit biases. It's just impossible. But we can try to, work on them and be as critical as we can. Alice, Lois, who's next?
I guess I can go. I feel like maybe I'm honestly not 100% sure on how to answer this question. Like, I understand it, but I've never really thought about it, to be fair. But I feel like in some ways there definitely could be ways that it can be curved, but it also kind of depends on the author's opinions, their sort of how they act in life and things like that. So I think it says sort of based on the author itself rather than the actual meaning of the book. But in the long run, I believe that obviously some people will agree with the book, some people will disagree, but that's happens with everyone. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Alice?
Well, I think the beauty of books is that they have the freedom to express your opinion and your knowledge. But although that does come with implicit bias, I think it's important for us to read critically and debate on it, rather than like criticize it and name it illegal and just curb it completely. I think it's important for us to like use it as a subject of debate and quite empathize with the perspective that they're presenting and considering their context. Although there are some books that are quite problematic, but you could always check websites and stuff to see what other people's opinion on it, maybe debate on that as well. And just I don't think we should completely curb it. I think, freedom to express and have other people kind of like assess on it. It's quite a good thing as well.
Yeah, so I think it might be a little bit already too late for us to be kind of starting a new conversation. Although I'd love to see you type in the chat what your favorite book is, what was the last book you read, maybe. But I think we can kind of already elaborate a little bit more in our work at MUNI Global. so basically, here at MUNI Global, like we're just this group of young people who are, trying to work towards the SDGs, and we work in regions as well as I already expressed. And it's like such an amazing place to work at. And we know that there are lots of projects that involve books that are coming up in the future. There are lots of projects in general coming up in the future. So if you could please, if you could please like check out our website and our Instagram, you can, stay tuned for that. But like, I encourage you all, if you're here, to join MUNI Global, like apply to be a diplomat. I think Sarah can just send the links one last time, because it's such amazing work. It's like a gateway to other MUNI programs. You have Lois here. I think she started, where did you start, Lois? MUNI Global or MUNI?
I started as a diplomat, and then I became a mentor,
Okay.
And now
yeah,
I'm
all the
everywhere.
rest of it. Yeah. So you started as a diplomat, and but then you see yourself and you're already everywhere. You're doing a summit, you are doing all these things. So we completely encourage you to join our team if you're in Europe, or other people's team. We know the DSGs, they're amazing. We know that some of the diplomats are also amazing. So yeah, sign up for sure to be a diplomat. Do we have any last questions maybe about MUNI? Oh, and Sarah just sent a link. You can always join the help desk. There are people there with a document about MUNI impact in our programs and how you can, participate, or you can be a volunteer at MUNI impact. I'm waiting to see if someone is typing something. In the meanwhile, we have more workshops today. If you want to join them, that's great. I'm presenting again. I don't think Lois is presenting again. Are you?
I am maybe presenting one more time right after this for everyone at home. So if you would like to join that, then feel free to come.
Yeah, join the MUN at Home presentation. MUN at Home is great. MUN people at home people are amazing. Lois is one of them. You'll also be joined, I think, by Heidi and Snada, who are also amazing. So join the MUN at Home presentation for sure. We have others later today. I'm presenting at the WashPap one, which is later today. So yeah, just join our other presentations. You can still RSVP at events.munimpact.org. And I'm going to see if Lois and Alice have any final remarks or like suggestions for you all, and then we can end this session.
Not from me, just thank you all for coming. If you would like to reach out to either myself or Rita about any of the questions, here are our emails. So feel free to reach out.
Also at help desk throughout the day, probably.
Yeah.
The help desk is open until 22 UTC. So for
the help desk
12 more hours or 11, I don't know.
Yes, it will be open for about 11 more hours. So if you guys would like to come out during the day or later on, that is completely fine. But if that is all, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you guys soon, whether that be in MUN Impact, one of our programs, or as a delegate or participant.
Alice, any final remarks?
Thank you for coming. I just want to say thank you all for coming as well. I hope you get something from this. I hope it inspires you to read, not just read, but read critically as well. And keep reading. Knowledge is power.
Yes, for sure. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to hand it over back to Aiko and Sarah, our amazing admins. Round of applause to them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for presenting. It was wonderful. And thank you all for coming. And just so that you know, there's more sessions, as they said. So please feel free to come if you haven't registered yet. Thank you and have a good day.